Hello, everyone. Very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Welcome to the Control Case webinar Compliance Update CSA STAR. Before we get started, I would like to run through quick housekeeping instructions. The webinar will be for 30 minutes, so we'll have ample time for any kind of questions which you have. If you have any questions, please put them in the questions window and we will address them. In case you have any issues in terms of audio or visual issues, please type them into the chat window and our moderators will address them. We will try to get to all the questions, but if we don't, we will follow up with emails after the session today, so don't worry about it. The slides and the recording of the webinar will be sent to everyone on this call early next week. Please visit our website at www.controlcase.com for other webinars on other regulations. All right, then let's get started. Compliance update CSA STAR. So let us start with a quick run through the agenda. So definitely I'll be introducing ourselves and our respected guest who is along with us today. Then this will be followed by a quick introduction of what is CSA STAR. We will go through the levels of CSA STAR assessments, and then Daniele will go through the CSA STAR domains. He will talk about the STAR registry and the most important part of the session today, that is to discuss about the Italian mandate about the CSA STAR certifications. This will definitely be followed by a Q&A sessions where you are free to put in all your questions and we will try and answer as much as we can in the time that we have. Otherwise, as we mentioned earlier, we will definitely reply to all your questions after the session today. So a quick introduction to the speakers on this session today. First, let me introduce our guest, Mr. Daniele Cattedd, Chief Technology Officer, Cloud Security Alliance. Daniele is an information security and risk management practitioner, a technologies expert, and he's a privacy evangelist with more than 15 years of experience. And most importantly, he's the co-founder and executive of the CSA Open Certification or the STAR program. So basically, whatever we are going to hear today is coming from, as they say, the horse's mouth, right? Because he's the one who is a co-founder. Welcome for, on this session, and thank you for being a part of this, Danielle.
My pleasure, Ashish. Thanks for the invitation.
It's my absolute pleasure. And a quick introduction about myself. I'm Ashish Kirtikar. I'm the Control Case president for the UK and Europe region. I myself have more than 15 years of experience in information security and related domains. So that's it about me. I think let's move to the topic of the day, CSA STAR. So let us start with what is CSA STAR. So CSA STAR basically was founded in 2011, and the STAR, STAR in CSA STAR stands for the Security, Transparency, Assurance and Risk Program. So CSA STAR is a registry which allows organizations to show current and potential customers their security and compliance posture. And it is also in alignment with the cloud's control matrix, which helps any kind of cloud providers to adhere to certain standard security and compliance posture requirements when it comes to cloud security or cloud provider security. STAR encompasses the key principles of transparency, rigorous auditing, and harmonization of standards outlined in the cloud's control matrix. More than me talking about it, I think I would let Daniele, who's definitely a co-founder and someone who knows about the STAR registry and CCM more than anyone else, I let him take over this discussion ahead. Daniele, what would you like to add on to what I have said already?
So thank you so much, Ashish. You did a great job. So as you mentioned, the program was founded back in 2011 when I joined CSA, and the idea behind the creation of the STAR program was really to offer a solution for assurance, governance, risk, and compliance to a market, the cloud computing market, that at that point it was very immature. Being very immature needed support in many ways, because for those of you that recall the genesis of the cloud market, there were a lot of barriers to the adoption of cloud services, and the main barriers were really a lack of trust, a perceived increased risk in embracing cloud services because of that loss of control, and lack of transparency. Given the limited amount of companies that were in the cloud space, so you can recall AWS and Google, Microsoft at that point, it was still an emerging, it was certainly not the hyperscaler that we know today. And the bargaining power of the cloud service providers versus the customer, it was so big that there was an incredible need for companies to get more transparency, to have a better understanding of what was really the security posture of those organizations. And that's why we decided to launch the program. So for one side, to offer to the market the possibility to have tools and mechanisms to evaluate cloud services, and a way for the cloud customer, also the cloud service provider, to show what they were doing in order to secure the data of the cloud customer. And from that perspective, the idea also to have a registry, which was a place where to show what a company was doing from the security and privacy standpoint, seemed to be the most logical approach. Pushing towards transparency and visibility, it was necessary back then, as it is, of course, right now in 2023, after 12 years where the cloud market has matured, but still we need that level of transparency, that level of visibility, in order to put cloud customer in the position to make informed decisions. I think this is very significant, because this is I think it notes down exactly what the STAR program is for, because the way in which we structured and we have been maturing the cloud program over the course of the last 12 years, it's about what it's in there, supporting the cloud market to define trust in cloud computing, support the market to foster accountability, which is a key principle from many points of view, especially when it comes to governance. The idea of having an accountable organization, it's key. As it is key, of course, the idea of being able to properly evaluate risk. I mean, for those of you that are operating in the regulated market, let's think about the financial sector. The idea of being able to proper measuring the risk and being able to show to your regulators that you are measuring the risk in the proper way is absolute key, and therefore a way to measure assurance. Now, the other key objective and purpose of the program is really also to simplify the approach to compliance and procurement. Again, as all of you that are working in large organizations know, having in some cases several thousands of SaaS applications is putting the organization under a lot of compliance stress. Is going through that process of compliance fatigue that is really, a burden over organization. And the idea of the program is really to kind of sustain and support companies in order to streamline the process to compliance and procurement.
Excellent. So basically, what you're trying to say is that the STAR program is assisting any kind of cloud computing provider, or anyone in the cloud computing market or working in the cloud computing market, one is definitely to evaluate the risk of, to their organizations, try and implement controls to control those risks. And second, from a customer perspective, is to provide that kind of assurance through the STAR program, through the certifications, through the assessments, to make sure that that kind of assurance is provided to their customers, that they are following the industry best practices or industry standards required for maintaining the security compliance for their cloud computing environment. Am I right in summarizing what you
Absolutely.
said?
Absolutely, absolutely. And maybe to add quickly on that, while the initial main or target audience was the cloud service providers, with the evolution of the cloud market, we see more and more a number of of large enterprises that, while they are using an infrastructure as a service provider, then they are in a situation of hybrid cloud. They are building their own application, and those applications, which are basically cloud-based application, they need to be secured as well. They need to be verified. They need to be certified eventually. So we are really covering now the overall market, as cloud has become essentially the main information technology approach for the large majority of the organizations.
Excellent. I think that that just gives us the cue to the next part of the session that we are going to talk about, is majorly the CSA STAR levels of assessment, right? So as you rightly talked about here, that there are multiple organizations, not just the cloud computing providers, but anyone who have any kind of solutions being hosted on the cloud environment and things like that. These are the ones who are looking at this CSA STAR level of assurance through the different types of assessments that are present as a part of the CSA STAR program. So if I can just quickly run through the levels of assessment. So the first level of assessment is the CSA STAR level 1, which is a self-assessment. So normally it is an approach taken by organizations who are in a low risk environment, who are not really handling very critical data or not handling critical information. So it is an approach taken by organizations who are in a low risk environment, who want to make sure that there is some kind of self check or assurance as to their current controls meet a certain industry standard or industry benchmark when it comes to information security compliance and information security implementation in their cloud computing environment. They are the ones who normally would go for the level 1, which is a self assessment, right? So there can be two aspects to it. There can be the security self-assessments and the privacy self-assessments. Before I move to the level 2, for our audiences, Daniele, can you help me with how we can use this self-assessment for something like a GDPR privacy, assurance or privacy compliance related activity? Because I'm certain that there are some aspects to the privacy self-assessment which can be used for that. If you can help us with that, Daniel.
Well, yeah, that's in fact very much correct. So the self-assessment. So we got in our registry two different types of self-assessment. One is based on the so-called CAIQ, Consensus Assessment Initiative Questionnaire. This questionnaire, which has been now in existence for over 13 years, is a set of questions based on the cloud control matrix controls. The approach is pretty simple. There is an association one-to-one or one-to-many between each CCM controls and the CAIQ questions. A company is going to reply to each one of the controls that are in place. Most of the large majority of those controls speaks to cybersecurity. And then there is a small minority of those controls that are very much about privacy, compliance and privacy in general. In addition to that, though, we have developed another standard called the Code of Conduct for GDPR Compliance, which is a separate set of questions and requirements that are aligned with the GDPR requirements for cloud. So going through that process, you're basically showing your adherence to the requirements of GDPR. Now, to be very precise, this code is not yet fully approved by the European Data Protection Board. Nevertheless, it gives you a very good approximation of what the level of compliance to GDPR should be.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniele, for this answer. And so when we move from the level 1 assessment, now we look at the level 2 assessment, which is like a third-party audit, wherein you have a third party which performs assessments against the certain controls of the CCM, the metrics, and it allows organizations to build off on other industry certifications and standards. So, for example, if you have to pursue a level 2 CSA STAR, you should either have a ISO 27001 certification or a SOC 2 assessment, which you are already adhering to, or you are holding these standards. So, Daniele, when we look at a level 2 certification, what are your thoughts on being certified to ISO 27001 or SOC 2? Like, is it mandatory, or as long as the requirements are being followed, then we can do it? How do you look at it, Daniel?
So, no, thanks for the question, because it allows me to clarify a few things. If we go quickly back to the genesis of the STAR level 2 approaches, so STAR certification and STAR attestation, the idea that I had in mind where those were created was fairly simple. There are two standards that we consider as to benchmark for the industry, for the cybersecurity industry in general. ISO 27001 from the one side, SOC 2 from the other side. None of these two standards, though, back in 2011 and not even now, are or were fit for purpose for cloud computing. So what we said was fairly simple. We got a great piece of intellectual property, which is the cloud control metrics. We got the shoulders of these two giants, ISO and SOC. Let's build on the top of the shoulders of the giants and overlay the controls of CCM on the top of the ones of ISO 27001 or SOC 2. And that's what basically STAR certification and STAR attestations are. STAR attestation assume that a company has already an ISO 27001. So ISO 27001 is a pre-requirement for any company that would like to achieve STAR certification. And then on the top of the normal cycle that you do, and this normal procedure that you do when implementing your information security management system, then you're going to add also within the management system also the CCM controls. So to augment the statement of applicability and includes the CCM controls and make that certification cloud relevant. Similarly, for SOC 2, we have the STAR attestation is a SOC 2 plus CCM. So it follows exactly the same auditing approach of SOC 2, but adding on the top of the trust and service criteria, the controls of cloud control metrics.
No. So I was just mentioning that it would be very similar to using ISO 27001 and SOC 2 as the base frameworks based on which you are building it ahead for CCM. Am I correct in this understanding?
Yes, well, essentially, yes. As I said, for STAR certification, you do an ISO 27001 audit and you extend the statement of applicability, which is the set of controls that you use during the audit, with the CCM controls. So you do ISO 27002 controls plus CCM. In the case of SOC 2, you do the trust and service criteria requirements plus the CCM. But then the auditing approach that is followed is the same. And even the requirements, as you know very well, being one of our assessors, the requirements that you need to follow in terms of as a certification body are the same that you would have for ISO or for SOC 2.
Thank you so much for this answer, Daniele. So moving on from level two, which is the third party audit. Now, one important thing in any compliance is maintaining a compliance, right? And that is where, one aspect is achieving a compliance, which is, I always say that it is normally the first milestone in the journey of compliance, right? It is just the start, and from there you go ahead to maintain your compliance, to continue the compliance. And that is where the new level 3 of the STAR comes into play, which is the STAR level 3, which is continuous auditing. So that is more
Correct.
like a continuous compliance, or maintaining the compliance and going ahead and ensuring that whatever has been achieved during the certification stage, that is continued and is built upon to improve the information security and privacy posture of the organization. Could you add some more light to this, Daniele, for this
Yes.
aspect of continuous auditing?
Well, you covered it very well. The only thing I would like to add there is the following: that cloud computing, by its own nature, it's a very ephemeral technology. It changes very quickly,
Right.
and therefore, in some cases, the so-called snapshot certification, so the point in time or over a period of time certification and attestation, so SOC 2 and ISO 27001, are good, but sometimes not good enough. In a way that if we think about ISO, so you have a 3-year cycle, you do an audit every year. Sometimes you can, shorten that time window to 6 months, but that's it. So within that, that time interval of 6 months or of 12 years, a lot of things could happen. Nevertheless, those are, as I mentioned before, two giants in the assurance space. I'm not certainly saying that they are not excellent. I'm saying that for certain specific use cases, there is a need to shorten that window in between checks. There is a need of increasing the frequency of the verifications. And that's why we started working, several years ago, and hopefully, at the end of this year, we're going to be able to release the proper solution. We have been working on the idea of continuous auditing-based certification, which essentially is a way to increment the level of assurance that is coming from a third-party certification or attestation with additional continuous auditing mechanisms, so as to intervene in that period during of absence of an auditor check, and replace basically the human auditor with the intervention of tooling that are going to be able to demonstrate compliance on a continuous fashion.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the additional inputs in this. It was really helpful. Now, once we move from the once we move in the assessments, there is definitely this aspect of what the assessment comprises of, and that brings us to the domains of CSA STAR, wherein there are multiple domains on which the assessments are conducted. So I here, as you are the expert in this, I would hand it over to you to run us through the CSA star domains, and try and get your insights on how to look at assessment in terms of how each domain has to be handled, and how each domain each domain has to be analyzed when we are getting into any CSA assessment. Over to you, Daniele.
Thanks. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the specific on the specificity of each one of the domain, but those are the, as you can see on the screen, that's the list of the 17 domains of the cloud control matrix. The way in which we structure the cloud control matrix, for those of you that are familiar with ISO 27001, it was very much initially based on the structure of the ISO 27001, except that being cloud computing a specific animal, if you like, we wanted to make sure that then some specific aspects that are key to cloud computing were very well reflected into the structure of the cloud control matrix. For instance, there are areas such as supply chain management, transparency, and accountability, which is a domain on its own. And this is important to highlight the importance of the governance and the control over the supply chain in cloud computing. Similarly, the domain on infrastructure and virtualization, which is very much it was typical of cloud computing. Well, it's not that virtualization is something that is only part of cloud computing, but it's a fundamental piece of it. In general, though, you can see that those domains, they cover every aspect of the cybersecurity program. So we got audit and assurance, application and interface security, which is again another domain that is very important within the context of cloud, because the security of the API is another key aspect of security, of having an effective cloud security program in place. If you would go into the details of the cloud control matrix, you will see also that the domain of cryptography, encryption, and key management is another one, or another of those domains that is fundamental to the in the context of the cloud control matrix, and in fact is one of those domains with higher number of controls. And then similarly, I would also like to call out the domain on logging and monitoring, again being that one of the other key area for the management and the of the security posture of an organization. Because I would also like to give you a brief overview of all the components of the cloud control matrix. So what you've seen for prior on the screen, it was the structure of the domains of the CCM, of the cloud control matrix, which, by the way, I forgot to mention that is structured, that includes 197 controls. Controls which are designed to be control objectives more than like technical controls. Each domain, for instance, has an initial control, which is a general policy control, and then some implementation and procedural control. But all of them are sitting at the level of abstraction of control objectives. Now, beside the core controls of the CCM, CCM has a number of different supporting guidances that are there to help both the organization in the implementation phase of those controls or in the phase of the monitoring. So we got the implementation guidance, we got the auditing guidance, then we got the cake, the questionnaire I was referring to, which is the foundation of the STAR level 1. Then we got a set of mappings between the controls of cloud control matrix and other existing standards out there. So for instance, we got a mapping to ISO 27001, to the ASCPA trust and service criteria. We got a mapping with the with NIST cybersecurity framework, which we are going to publish very soon. We got a mapping with NIST special publication in 153 and many others. The other important aspects that I would like to call out is the one of metrics. Now, this is a new addition that we have been developing to CCM since last year. So the idea was to give to our customers, to our users, the possibility to have a more fine-grained understanding and way to measure the implementation of a CCM controls. And that's why we are building metrics that can be used in order to have, again, this fine-grained control of the quality of the implementation of a CCM controls. We are developing also some addendum. Currently we are working on a specific vertical for financial sector of the cloud control metrics, because again, the assumption is that the work that we have done with cloud control metrics is actually pretty good, but it's not able to cover necessarily all the requirements in all the business sector and in all the countries around the globe. So rather than extending the scope of the framework ad infinitum, we are going to have some addendum that it can be used as a plug-in to the set of core controls in order to satisfy the requirements of a specific business vertical, as I mentioned, for instance, the financial sector, or for a specific country.
Thank you, Daniele. So now that we have discussed about the assessment, we have discussed about what are the STAR domains and everything. So this gives us a fair understanding of what it is, what it would be required to.
So you can consider the STAR registry as a public window. It's a repository where we host the results of the self-assessment and the third-party certification and attestations. The idea, as I mentioned in the beginning, was to offer to the cloud community, the cloud market in general, the opportunity to have a repository of assessment that could be used in order to perform a risk-based evaluation of cloud services in the spirit of transparency. And that's why something that we have imposed as a requirement to be able to participate in our program is that the organizations need to publish voluntarily the result of their self-assessment or of the certification on this registry. The registry currently contains over 2,000 services. Is by far the largest repository of cloud cybersecurity assessment in the world. There isn't anything that is similar to it. One of the beauty is that those information are freely accessible by anyone. So, for instance, if you are a small and medium company that it's thinking of procuring a cloud service, you are going to be able to use our registry as a way to collect information about the security posture of that short list of services that you are considering. Again, the spirit is to allow informed decision, risk-based informed decisions. Something that I think is, again, I would like to highlight is that this transparency requirement is something that we notice not to be part of the more standard certification attestation approaches. One of the limitations from my point of view of ISO 27001 is, for instance, that you can see in the market companies claiming I am ISO 27001, but those companies, in most of the cases, that do not declare the scope of their certification. Now, arguably, that is a useless information because you might have your, I don't know, your kitchen that is like certified ISO 27001, not necessarily that portion of the services that is relevant to me as a customer. While in our case, we are imposing organization to declare in details what's the scope of that certification, and what are the controls that are within the statement of applicability, so that you know at any point in time, again, is which controls a certain service has been evaluated and what's the scope of that evaluation. The information within the registry are manually accessible by anyone. In the case of CSA corporate members, they do have also access to an API that it allows to basically funnel all the data from the registry into the internal GRC system in a way that you can have fresh information about the security posture of those cloud services at any point in time. Which again, I think it's a very powerful way in order to, going back to what I mentioned earlier, the idea of streamlining compliance, streamlining procurement, obtaining standardized information, it's key to the success of that endeavor.
Excellent. So what you told me about Star Registry, that the registry helps not only from the cloud provider perspective, but also from a customer perspective, because once you're listed on the registry, it provides the customers also a view into the information security posture of the organization, and they can make an informed decision. At the same time, being on the registry works for the providers, because they can also highlight it to their customers or prospective customers as to what level of security and what level of compliance that they are maintaining. So it acts as like a win-win situation for both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, no,
In this
absolutely,
case.
yes.
Perfect. So now when we move on, now to one of the most important aspects of uh, today's session is the Italian mandate. So, before I move on to what your inputs on this Italian mandate, from what I understand that, Italy as the national security board of Italy, that is the ACN, they have taken up this very important mandate to make sure that the cloud service providers in their region meet a certain level of security compliance and security posture, and that they have implemented with the assistance of the cloud controls matrix and the STAR program as the main key pillars to help achieve these compliance requirements for the providers. So can you explain us what is this Italian mandate? How is it going to impact the cloud providers in that regions? How it is going to impact the customers? If you can throw some light on that.
Yes, no, definitely yes. So first of all, as you can know, I guess it's pretty obvious from my accent. I'm Italian, so the fact that my own country has been adopting a program that I've been the founder of, it's kind of it makes me very happy. Now, the story, it's pretty straightforward. For those of you that are familiar with the European Commission Cybersecurity Act, that it was approved a few years back. So that Cybersecurity Act effectively established a classification of data and information on 3 levels. And the main purpose of it is really to improve the security and resilience of the overall, European Union market, having a specific focus on public administration and the critical sector infrastructure. In the same level of classification and the same rules are, of course, taken upon from Italian government, that through the ACN, which is the Italian Cybersecurity Agency, decided to have a very pragmatic approach in order to evaluate the security of those providers that are either part of the Italian cloud marketplace. So that is basically the marketplace that has been created to have as repository of services that can be safely used by Italian public administration, as well as for the purpose of securing the so-called national hub, which is a sort of governmental public cloud, and all the providers that are gonna be part of this national hub, including all the supply chain of those providers. In order to, in fact, do the accreditation and approval of those providers, they, when it comes to the cloud services, they decided very pragmatically to do two things. So rather than reinventing the wheel and starting to create their own set of national requirements, very pragmatically they took as a sort of inspiration to existing framework, the NIST cybersecurity framework in terms of high-level structure, and then the controls of the cloud control matrix when it comes to the specific cloud computing services. And then, of course, attached to the security requirements of the framework, they decided to use the STAR program as a vehicle to perform the accreditation of those organizations. Now, the accreditation structure, so has 4 levels of compliance, if you like. So there are 3 levels of data classification, and those are ordinary, critical, and strategic. And this level of classification is basically equal across the board in all the European Union. And then there are 4 levels of compliance. The reason why there is this mismatch between classification of data and level of compliance is because there are some services that are classified as some data that are classified as critical, but they are part of a specific perimeter of services within the public administration, and therefore they acquire a higher status in terms of compliance needs. But the summary is that any company that is aiming for the level of compliance 1 or 2 could decide, in order to to be an authorized cloud service provider, between ISO 27001 plus ISO 27017 and plus ISO 27018, or STAR level 2. That possibility of selection, it applies to levels 1 and 2. When it comes to level 3 and 4, which is the highest level of compliance, then STAR level 2, it becomes mandatory. So having an ISO 27001 plus 17 plus 18 is not sufficient anymore. You need to have necessarily a STAR certification or a STAR attestation. And of course, that speaks to the fact that even from the Italian cybersecurity agency perspective, the level of rigor and the level of security that is guaranteed by STAR certification and STAR attestation is somewhat superior of what is in fact provided by a simple ISO approach. In terms of numbers, so we are looking at a large amount of organizations that are going to be subject to the STAR level 2. Because we are looking at three categories of cloud services. All those services that are within the cloud public marketplace. Then we are looking at those organizations that are part of the so-called national security hub. And then those that are part of the national security perimeter. So the national security perimeter is somewhat, is loosely associated to the idea of critical information infrastructures. So those companies that are within the perimeter of the national Information Security Infrastructure and Protection Program that are using cloud services, they need to ensure that the cloud services are using are certified with STAR. So all in all, we are looking at, take it or leave it, between 1,500 and 2,000 companies that in the space of a few months we need to get certified with STAR certification or attested with STAR attestation.
Okay, that's great information, and that's a huge number to be going for this kind of certification, and I think that will really bring a kind of standardization in terms of security implementation in the region per se. When we look at Italy as a region, and I think that would definitely be something which can be emulated by the other countries in the European region. Daniele. So,
Well,
and I think that, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to add that, that is definitely the case. So we recently, as CSA, signed an MLU with the Israeli Cybersecurity Directorate as they are looking at STAR level 2 as a way to certify local SaaS providers that are offering SaaS services to the within this Israeli market. We are going soon to have an MLU with the Turkish government, which again is going to adopt the CCM requirements as a part of the national legislation for a national strategy for cloud security. So this is something that, yeah, we see more and more happening. And of course, I mean, we are, very happy with that, because, that means, as you mentioned, I mean, it means standardization towards a standard that is open source. Because something that I failed to mention during the course of this long chat is that anyone can go on our website and download and use Cloud Control Metrics. It's free of charge for everyone. And that's, I guess, one of the biggest beauty of it, because it's basically democratizing the market of security, making sure that there is an open source set of controls that anyone can use, anyone can criticize, and anyone can help to improve.
All right, thank you, Daniele. I think that was really amazing. Like, you just summarized it very rightly by saying that it is available and it democratizes the security and information security compliance space, for everyone to be accessing it and it to be accessible to everyone. So, thank you again, Daniele, for running us through this session today. And we discussed about CSA STAR. We discussed about what it is, that is the STAR registry, the CCM controls, and most importantly, we also discussed about the Italian mandate, which, as you have just mentioned, that might even go on further to other regions in across the globe, where the use of CCM and use of the CSA STAR program would definitely be increased and will be used as a standard industry benchmark when it comes to cloud computing practices. And most importantly, as we see that the cloud market is growing as ever. So I think that this would be a very, very important certification or assessment to have in anyone's kitty. So that concludes the presentation part of the session today, and I will quickly run on to the question and answer session. So I will go through some of the questions which have come in the questions window, and I will try and answer as many as we are already at the end of the clock here for the session. So I will quickly take at least 2 or 3 questions. So let us start first with a question which I see here about the Italian mandate. So that is something which is very important. So let's start with that. Daniele, the first question to you here is that are there any dates which have been put up to comply with the Italian mandate? Right? Are there any dates which have been given out by ACN uh, as to up to a certain date they have to be compliant, or at least undergo a self-assessment or undergo the level 2 assessment? Is there any such kind of details
Yeah,
that have
so
come up?
the deadline is the end of July of this year. So there are two deadlines for those companies that are not already part of the accreditation program. They will need to adhere by the end of July of this year. For those that are already part of the compliance program, which because the old one it was again based on CCM STAR, they have time until the end of the year.
Excellent. Thanks for giving those details on the dates. A second question, which might be really important, who is going for the first time for the CSA Star, you know, is it mandatory to have completed CSA Star level 1 self-assessment to pursue the level 2? This is a
Yes,
question which has come up.
yes.
Okay.
It's an incremental level of compliance. So in order to get to level 2, you first need to complete level 1, or you can do it at the same time. But yes, you can't avoid doing the self-assessment before getting the full-fledged certification or attestation.
All right. I think I will come to one more question before we end the session today. So, this question says that is it necessary or is it advisable that once they complete the level 1 self-assessment, have any third party validate that self-assessment, or straight away they
Definitely
can move
yes.
to a level 2? Okay. Okay.
No, definitely yes. It serves as a step of as preparedness, if you like. So yes, it's advised. It's not mandatory, but it's certainly advised.
All right, I think that's it here. I think I will have to end the set of questions. There are quite a few more other questions, but as we said that we will, get back to you with answers for them after this session. So that's all the time we have for today for our webinar. Hopefully, you find this webinar to be helpful. The slides and recordings of this webinars will be sent to everyone on this call early next week. As I mentioned earlier, any additional questions which are there already in the questions window, we will address them in email once we are done with the session right now. Please feel free to visit our website at www.controlcase.com for other webinars on other regulations. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate the time you all have taken out today to join us. Daniele, thank you so much for joining us and helping Control Case, create more awareness about the CSA STAR certification. And definitely, it will help everyone who are there on the session today or who will listen into the session later to understand that how helpful CSA STAR would be in their compliance journey to maintain and achieve information security and privacy compliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day, everyone. Until the next webinar, goodbye.